a beautiful story. Na, na, na. See, I love to think now I am living a better life. And I'm grateful for the life that I am living. I want your body sleeping in my bed. You got me going crazy. Oh girl, I can't explain it. Your body's so insane. Oh girl, I can't replace you. You got me going crazy. Oh girl, I can't explain it. Your body's so insane. Oh girl, I can't replace you.
Hi guys, thank you so much for connecting to this session. My name is Bulu Omotayo and I lead the Carifest community. And as you know, once a month we hold a Talking Money and Opportunity session where we bring in people who have achieved some level of expertise in their field to help us address concerns as regards accessing local and global opportunities as well as accessing um, 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 education as regards finances and typically related or relative to young Africans. So on this session of Talking Money and Opportunity, like I said, it's a session where we talk about money, everything that we need to know about money, education, saving, investments, and of course opportunities like scholarships, scholarship of which we'll be discussing today. So we'll be having Suzanne Onta to as our guest. And believe me, this is one of those sessions that you do not want to miss. And if you are not currently connected or your friend is not currently connected, I would advise that you ask or call them that they should join any of the streaming platforms. We are currently streaming on Instagram Live, we are streaming on YouTube, and we are also streaming on Facebook. I would advise you connect them to it. And of course, if they cannot connect, typically because of connection problems, they should please come back and watch these videos because they are very, very educative videos. So I'll be bringing up Suzanne now. Suzanne is coming up now. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you so much for honoring our invite. Thank you so much. Can you
No
hear me
problem.
clearly?
I'm glad to be here. Yep, I can hear you.
All right, awesome, awesome. Can everybody see clearly? I want to be sure that everybody can see and hear us clearly before we proceed, so that some people are not behind while we are far front. All right, so Susan is our guest for the day, and I would like us to start by asking her to please introduce herself. So, guys, don't forget the topic for the day is accessing local and international opportunities. And believe me, Suzanne is that person that you want to listen to. She has been doing this for the past couple of years, and it's an area of expertise basically. So, guys, please ensure that you write all your questions down because we are going to be answering all the questions later on the session. So, all right, Susan, please kindly introduce yourself to us.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Suzanne. I am. I work at the African Leadership Academy in Johannesburg, South Africa. And over the past 10 years, I've been working in university guidance and university access. So I started as a college counselor, so helping students from across the continent access and afford higher education around the world. So on the continent, North America, basically everywhere around the world. And my work now is mainly focused on scholarships, but still in the university access space. So I run the African Leadership Academy's partnership with the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program, and we support students from around sub-Saharan Africa to access higher education around the world. And I'm passionate about helping young people connect with opportunities that will help them further themselves in their careers and their professional development. And education really is a game changer. And so really excited to be here and share a little bit about scholarships locally and internationally.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that brief introduction. Guys, in summary, Susan helps people connect to global opportunities, global relevant opportunities. And I can clearly remember in 2019 or 2020, there was a time I was trying to access an MBA opportunity and I needed someone to talk to, I needed someone to guide me. And Susan was that person that I reached out to. And believe me, all our guidance were very, very helpful and very relevant. Although I didn't follow through, but they were really, really helpful. So I want you guys to please pay as much attention as you can because it's going to be a very interesting session. So my next question is going to be how easy or how difficult is it to access local and international scholarships? And I'm consciously saying local scholarships because I want us to address it differently, and international scholarships because I want us to address it differently.
Yeah, sure. So scholarships at their core are competitive. They are not available to everyone. Money is there's a limit in the amount of money that universities and scholarship providers can give. And usually scholarships are based off of a combination of merit and need. So merit is how did you do in secondary school? Or if you're applying to master's scholarships, how did you do in university? And need is kind of your financial need, if your family needs the money to be able to afford higher education. And local scholarships are typically, in the grand scheme of things, local scholarships are somewhat easier and more accessible just because it's an easier sell to go to a local university. Higher education costs abroad are very, very steep. And so it's an easier sell to get a scholarship to get $1,000 scholarship at local university than to get that same fraction of a scholarship at a US university or Canadian university, which is tens of thousands of dollars. But it all comes down to your competitiveness as a candidate. If you have strong marks, if you have proven leadership and proven commitment to your community and done a lot, you will be a strong contender. It's a very competitive market. So applying to one scholarship isn't the right strategy. You have to apply and try different scholarship schemes, some government, some private, some through universities. There are tons of places where you can look for scholarships and tons of different ways of getting scholarship funding. But it's a process. You don't just get it after applying to the first one. And so I think locally it's easy. There are a lot of like corporate social responsibility schemes within countries that are interested in investing in young people who will in turn come and work for them. It's a way of building up their human capital pipeline. So if a bank has a scholarship program, they're giving people money and with the hopes of them coming back to work for the bank. And some small kind of private scholarship providers exist within countries. When you're looking internationally, there's a lot on the market. There's a lot that's available at varying types of scholarships. So a scholarship in one place is not equal to a scholarship in another. So you can get a full scholarship somewhere, but that just covers tuition, doesn't cover housing. So there are a lot of elements at play. But internationally, there's just a lot more. There's tons of competition from all over the world for a small pool of money. So it's all about metrics and who you are, what you've done, how you've proven your ability. So strong grades, strong leadership, strong community recommendations. Teachers have great things to say about you, done a lot in your community. Obviously, all those things make you competitive. I think on an international level, prestige kind of plays a heightened role of grades and test scores and how do you do on the final exam. And so they're not inaccessible. They're just competitive, especially the scholarships that give a lot of money. So the full scholarships that cover housing and that cover health insurance and everything you need to go to university, those are quite competitive, but not impossible to get.
Cool. Thank you so much. I think a key highlight for me from your response is that we should think of scholarships from the perspective of competitiveness and not necessarily from the perspective of if it's easy or if it's hard. And of course, one of the things that you also highlighted is the fact that there are different kinds of scholarships. So depending on the kind of scholarship you are applying for, and you talked about the fact that the ones that usually come with the most competition is usually full scholarships. So for those joining us, please understand that the mindset that you need to have when you are trying to access scholarships isn't the mindset of, is this going to be easy or is it going to be difficult? Have the mindset of it's going to be competitive, and typically it's because that there are few opportunities and there are a lot of people who want these opportunities. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your response. My next question is going to be, can you please highlight certain myths surrounding accessing scholarship by young Africans? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because, so one of the things that happened to me when I was in uni, FYI, I studied in Nigeria and my university education was on scholarship. I got a scholarship, a local scholarship from Total, this is oil and gas firm, Total NNPC, Oil Corporation, something. So I got a local scholarship. And I know that one of the things that helped me in the application process was a word that someone said to me. The person said, "It is possible." And the person also said that he had also accessed several scholarships. So words like that helped debunk certain myths that I have had. Like it's only for a select few, it's only for people who know certain people, it's only for people who have certain connections. And these are some of the things that helped me in applying. I think I applied for about 3, but I got one eventually. So like, what are the basics that needs to be debunked as regards accessing scholarship for young Africans?
Yeah. So 2 big ones. And the first is tied to what you were saying. So I think there's a kind of, I don't know if it's a myth, but there's a perception amongst young people that where they go to high school and the prestige of their high school and the level of their high school matters. And while it does, so like while there's some high schools that are always top ranked on WIAC or whatever, just because you go to a school that's not as good doesn't mean you have a lesser chance. I think a lot of people tie their chances to where their level, like their immediate surroundings, and they say like, oh, I go to a school that isn't as well resourced, that we don't have as strong of exams as other schools, and so they immediately discredit themselves almost because they don't believe in themselves. It's like what you were saying about it being possible, and so I think it's this firm belief of no matter where you go or where you went to school, what background you're from, what socioeconomic status you're from, everyone is the playing field is leveled when you're applying for scholarships. Just because you go to a big fancy school that's known for cranking out top achievers on the exam doesn't mean you have a better chance than someone who comes from a rural school that's not as well resourced and doesn't have as good as track record. It's all about believing in yourself and thinking in like having belief that your background is good enough. And you might apply for a scholarship and not get it. That's life. As Bolu said, you applied for 3. Like, reality is you're going to apply for scholarships and you won't get it. It's not because you're not qualified. It's because there's a finite number of spots. So if you're applying for a scholarship that gives 5 spots a year and there are 3,000 students applying, there are hundreds who are very, very, very well qualified. And just because you don't get it doesn't mean that you're not worthy. It's a numbers game. So you have to get out there and make sure you're applying to the right opportunities and you're applying to multiple opportunities. And then the second, I would say, is kind of a bigger theme of international versus local scholarships and students tying prestige to international scholarships. I think a lot of students who want to study abroad put an emphasis on being abroad, and just because they want to go abroad, and they will kind of discredit local scholarships. And they'll say like, no, I don't want to go to university in my home country. I want to go abroad. I want to get funding to go abroad. That's fine if that's what someone wants to do, but you're not getting a lesser education if you go to school in your home country. I think a lot of students see like the bright lights of studying abroad and think they're going to get a better education. And it can for some students, it can derail them because they're so focused on getting scholarship abroad, but university abroad is so expensive. And they might spend years trying to get scholarships and they don't get it. Or they're putting their family in positions where their family is going to have to pay a lot of money. And so I think it's just valuing any sort of education that you can access. Part of the core of my work is access. It's like where you go to university doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're getting a degree and you're making progress towards your professional and personal goals. So I think like there's this myth that going to university abroad is shiny and exciting, and while it is, you're not getting a better education than if you were to go to a local university or get a local scholarship. So I think when you're thinking about options, do not discredit local scholarships, because going to a local university you could spend your 3 or 4 years at university building your networks on the ground at home. And so when you graduate, you enter the job market and you have networks, you have people, you have job leads. If you leave your country, you could leave for 4 years and come back and feel like a stranger and not really know how to find a job or who to reach out to or who to ask for help. So I think that second myth is a little bit big, but it's a little bit hairy, but it's the fact that an international education is not better than a local education. And so don't discredit it, because for a lot of people, that's the best option.
Cool. Thank you so much for your response. And I particularly like these responses because there are things that I'm faced with and every other person is faced with. And your first response was that a lot of people think that their high school matters. So for those who want to get university scholarship, or for those who want to get a postgraduate scholarship. For those in high school, for example, they think that their high school really matters and it determines if they are going to get the university scholarship. And for those who want to get the postgraduate study scholarship, they think that the university they attended really matters and that affects if they would particularly get the scholarship. So what Susan just said now is that that's not true. It doesn't matter. What is basically required is the requirements provided by those offering the scholarship. So everybody has a level playing field, which typically is so. For if you are in high school, for example, you must have shown gotten recommendations from your community, for example, among several other things. So everybody has a level playing field to play from. So guys, the high school you went to does not matter. It doesn't determine if you would get a scholarship or not. Then the second thing that she talked about is tying prestige to international scholarships and thinking that international scholarships are far greater than local scholarships. So what Susan just said now is that is not true. That is not true. She said that there are different things involved in all of them, and one of the things that she talked about is the fact that international scholarships are usually very, very competitive. So why waste time? Why waste that kind of resources? Because they're usually always very expensive again. Apart from competitiveness, they're usually very expensive. So and that really doesn't matter if you would get a job in a particular organization or something. I know people who went to local schools here in Nigeria, for example, and are currently working in the UAE or in the US with their local degree. So it's basically a level playing field of you being able to prove yourself that you have what it takes to to get whatever you need to get. Do you understand what I just said, guys? So please drop those myths. Now, you said something, Susan. You said where you study doesn't matter. I quite agree with you, but I also agree with you. And the reason is because, so let's take, so there's this series, for example, I want to talk specifically. So there's this series, for example, it's called Suits. And in Suits, one of the things that you realize is that you cannot become a partner or something if you did not go to Harvard. So I know that there are several organizations that you can't have or you can't hold certain positions if you did not go to certain schools. So can you please explain to us about that? Because that typically might be a reason why some people are struggling to get into Harvard, or they want to get into Stanford, or they want to get into ALU, or some of the other great institutions that we have across the world.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think where you go is really relevant these days. I mean, remember, Suits is a TV show. I think in Bolo, I think we've talked about this before. There was a big study that came out of the U.S. About 2 or 3 years ago, and they looked at hundreds of thousands of people who graduated from universities of all types. So the Harvards and the Stanfords of the world, and then the small schools that accept almost anyone who applies, that nobody has ever heard of, that if I said the name, nobody would ever recognize. And the study was focused on looking at their career trajectory, how much money they were making, the time it took them to get a job after graduation, and kind of their medium to long-term plans. And the bottom line was that where you go has no impact on your kind of like it's kind of, I don't even think it has any impact on your career trajectory, kind of the time it takes for you to get from your first job to a promotion in your second job, or the promotion, and like overall happiness, because well-being is also really important. And the bottom line was where you went didn't matter, but what you did while you were there did matter. So how you engaged was what mattered. So did you go to a small university that is not that well recognized, has a low acceptance rate, but was student body president, found a mentor, had a bunch of internships, was keeping busy professionally and personally, that is what matters more than if you went to Harvard and stayed in your room and studied all day. I think there's a myth that if you go to prestigious schools like QR ratings, top 100, you'll get a job easier. But I think that's just not relevant anymore. And especially as like the job market's moving and like soft skills really, really matter. They're looking for well-rounded candidates who have that type of exposure to different internships, different types of research opportunities. I think that matters. I think there are people around the world who will tell you that where you get your degree matters more. I just think that's a pretty superficial response because it's not based off of anything. And like Harvard and Yale and Stanford, great universities, but they accept 4 or 5% of the candidates. And the world needs more CEOs, doctors, lawyers, everyone than these universities can crank out. And so it's, I think like a pretty somewhat out of date / old mentality is the fact that if you went to a prestigious school, you're more employable or you'll make more money. But I've worked with a lot of students in ALA. We have a lot of examples of students who have kind of taken either an untraditional path to university, so like taken a gap year, gone to university in Asia, gone to university in the Middle East, and their outcomes and their end goals are no different than students who went to Ivy League schools. I think like the prestige around Ivy League will never disappear, but I don't really think it's relevant. I mean, Ivy League at its core, the definition of Ivy League, it's a sports league. Like it's a bunch of universities that play sports against each other, and prestige has just been tied to it. So I don't think any ratings or any top 10 lists can tell you where you should go to school, especially if these schools only accept a tiny fraction of the candidates. So yeah, I just think I get where you're coming from. I just think in today's job market, it's really about your level of engagement and exposure to the professional world rather than what name is on your degree.
Thank you so much. I like what you just said about Ivy League schools, where you said Ivy League schools are just a group of schools that play sports against one another. And that's just it. So then another very interesting pick out for me from your response was where you said that what you did in school is far greater than where you went to. So for me, what it meant was if I go to a local school in Mozambique, for example, or I go to a local school in Uganda, and while I was in school, I had a lot of social impact. My community knew that there was a student here that contributed immensely to community progress. My lecturers knew that I did as much as I can academically, and I contributed as several other places as I can. I led the sports team and I did this and I did that. So the point I got from you now is that is greater than the person who went to Harvard and just sat in his room to study entirely without necessarily contributing anything. So guys, it's about your contribution. It's about what you did over where you go to. So don't degrade or don't value local scholarships, international scholarships above local scholarships. Thank you so much. Now, my next question is, what kind of scholarships exist? And the reason I'm asking this question is because, so I hear people say things like, oh, I got a part scholarship, and I hear someone say something like, I got an assistantship, and I hear somebody say, I got this a 50% scholarship that also allows me study and things like that. So it begins to get confusing at some point. So how do I know? I think she has a bit of connection challenges. Please hold on, guys. I think she has terrible connection. Please hold on. If you can log out and log back in. 1 second. Okay, all right. So she's going to. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much for connecting to this call, guys. Um, we are currently hosting Suzanne Onta. Suzanne Onta is in charge of scholarships at the Mastercard Foundation. Hi, can you see me now?
Yeah.
Wow, sorry about that. That was some crazy, terrible network connection.
No, it's fine.
Yes. So, hold on, please. I'm trying to reconnect across all the different platforms.
Take your time.
All right. Thank you so much. That was some. Yes. So, please. I'm trying to see if Instagram is back live. Okay, yes, Instagram is back up. Let me check. I want to confirm if YouTube was also back. I'm so sorry
No, no, take your time.
for the brief. All right, cool. Yes. So we stopped at my question
Scholarships.
where I was
Yeah.
asking scholarships. What are different kinds of scholarships that exist? Yes,
Yeah.
that's where we stopped. All right. Yeah.
So there are a lot of different types of scholarships. I think kind of high level, there are two ways you can qualify for scholarship funding. The first is, like I said at the beginning, it's called merit. So merit is your grades. Merit is who you are, what you've done, irrespective of your socioeconomics and how much funding you need. So you can be the best student in the world and have money to be able to afford university, but you get a merit scholarship just because you are the best student in the world. Those are very competitive because they're based on merit. So usually the top 2% of applicants to a university might get a merit scholarship. The second type is need. So it's basically how much do you need, and you have to fill in financial aid forms, and you have to send bank statements and all of that to show that you need scholarships. And then in terms of the scale, universities can give anywhere from zero scholarships to some universities give full scholarships. Full scholarships are rare if you're thinking on the kind of large scale. In the US, for example, there are 4,000 or so colleges and universities, and only about 70 of them give full scholarships. And what I mean by full scholarships is it covers your tuition. So it covers all your credits, all of your cost of attendance, plus room, plus a dorm room, and board, which is meal plan. And so if you think that's a massive discrepancy between 4,000 colleges and universities, only 70 can give full scholarships. Full scholarships are very expensive, $70,000 per person per year. So they're rare. You'll see some universities that will say they give scholarships, but they will give what's called tuition scholarships. So they'll just cover the cost of your credits, and you'll have to cover your housing and your meals and your health insurance and your flight there. And then for this fractional scholarship that people see, so some universities will say, you qualify for a 50% tuition scholarship. So that just means they cut tuition in half and your family still pays the room and board. So it's a little bit unclear because everyone uses the phrasing scholarships and they don't specify what sort of scholarship they give or up to a certain amount. And so there kind of the full scholarship model for everything, including housing and food and all of that, is spreading around the world. It's kind of in the past 10 years, it's been a strategy for universities to have that kind of financial aid package around the world. It used to be a very US centric kind of model. But now there are universities in India and in South Korea and in Japan and in Malaysia, UAE that can give full scholarship, including housing. I think the big thing is when you get a tuition scholarship, you still have to pay. You still have to live, so you need to think about whether a full tuition scholarship is even enough. In some places, so So if you get a full tuition scholarship, that's great. It might be a very high valued full tuition scholarship, but you'll still have, depending on where you are, between a couple of thousand to $15,000 in housing, food, housing, health insurance costs a year. So you just need to be aware of those different variations of scholarships. Usually universities are pretty good at differentiating between tuition scholarships and full scholarships. Full, by definition, covers housing, tuition, room and board. And there have been students who've gotten partial scholarships from a university, and they've gone out and gotten like a corporate scholarship from a company to cover housing. So you can, if you get a partial scholarship, you can look elsewhere for other funding to make sure it's possible. But higher education, particularly off the continent, is very expensive. And there are some places where you can't get, like, where they won't even give scholarships at all. But so you just need to be aware of kind of the geographies where money is available and where scholarship funding is available, and where it isn't, because you need to, when applying for scholarships, you kind of need to pick your battles. You're not going to apply for a scholarship in, I don't know. So like the Netherlands, for example, doesn't give much scholarship funding at all. You might get like a tiny fraction off, but if you're looking for a full scholarship, don't apply to a university or a market where it's not even possible. And another thing to remember is that if you get in somewhere outside of your home country, if you get in somewhere and like get a partial scholarship, you actually need to prove that you can cover the other part. It's part of immigration law. So like if you're going to study in Canada, you need to prove that you can cover whatever gap is not covered by the university. So you need to be very careful and true to yourself and your family about whether a partial scholarship is sufficient, because you won't be able to get a visa if you can't confirm that you can cover it, which is, it's just this, I mean, it's smart because you want to get somewhere and not be able to cover your costs. But yeah, I think kind of high level bottom line is that universities oftentimes don't do a great job of describing their scholarships, but just look for the different differentiation between full scholarship and full tuition. If they give full tuition, your family will have to pay in addition to that, even though it says full. It's just covering tuition costs.
All right, thank you so much. So my question for Suzanne was that what are the different kinds of scholarships that exist? For those who are just joining us, I'm currently hosting Suzanne Hunter, and we are discussing accessing local and international scholarships. Suzanne is director in charge of scholarships at the Mastercard Foundation, and she just provided the response to one question I asked, and of course, which is what are the different kinds of scholarships that exist. So she said that there are some scholarships that are by merit. You did so well, you came out extraordinarily well, very excellent in a particular field or something. You were very great at sports, and you get a scholarship and stuff like that. So that's one type of scholarship by merit, and another one is by need. Are you from a place of financial incapability, or you are from a place of or maybe you come from a race or a tribe, of like different things could surround the need for which you get a scholarship. And of course, the other one she talked about is scholarship by skill. And for skill, typically she's talking about finances. So it could be from no scholarship at all to full scholarship. So she talked about the fact that full scholarships are usually very rare, and that's typically because they're usually very expensive. So think about you get a $70,000 scholarship, for example, if you're looking to study abroad. Then some scholarships would say just tuition, but you would have to take care of every other thing, like your housing, like your feeding, and several other things that you need while studying on campus. Then she also talked about the fact that there are some places that typically do not offer scholarships, or just very small scholarships. And she talked about the Netherlands. So if you are looking at places to apply for scholarship at, understand that there are some places that typically do not offer any form of educational scholarship. Then she also talked about the fact that universities do a great job by providing as much information as you need regarding the kind of scholarship that they are offering. And guys, don't forget that it's not only university that provides scholarships. Organizations also provide scholarships. Some provide for their employees, so that that person will come back to contribute immensely to the development of their workforce and things like that. So that was the last question I asked her. So my next question is that, can you walk us through a scholar's journey from 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 interest? So a scholar sees a scholarship opportunity and says, "Oh, okay, I'm interested in this." So typically, what's the journey like? So if I want to go into, if I want to buy something on Jumia, for example, what I would typically do is I would go on Jumia and I would find the product, I'll add it to my cart, I'll make payments and expect delivery. So what's the process usually like from interest to actually receiving the great news that yes, I've been awarded the scholarship?
Yeah, so it's a process for sure. Usually, I mean, students start the research process 2-3 years before they start even applying, because you need to.
2 years.
It could be more. I mean, there are some schools, there are some scholarship programs that start working with their students when they're in their first year of secondary school to plan for university. And it's because it's an educational process. You need to, it's not just you're applying places. Like, you need to determine where you're applying, what course of study, different sort of educational models. So like the UK educational model differs greatly from the US, which differs greatly from Canada. You need to make an informed decision about where you're applying and why you're applying there, and then understand the requirements. So there's some places where you might apply for university that require more than just your high school transcript and school leaving certificate. They might require external testing. So things like the ACT or SAT or UCAT or any of these like UK entrance exams. And that requires planning. It also requires time for you to study, and it requires money. Those tests are not free. And so the sooner, I mean, the earlier you can kind of prepare, this is where I'm applying, this is what I need in order to apply, because it's not a one size fits all process of applying to university. Every country has their own kind of process, but within a country, it's not necessarily centralized. So you could be applying to universities in Japan, and it might not be the same process for every university. So it's about being methodical, about building a kind of a checklist of this is what I need, because you need to have a complete application to apply. So once you know where you're applying, you need to know what you need in order to actually apply to those places. And most of it can be done by yourself. So things like getting your academic reports, getting reference letters from your teachers or your headmaster, and then compiling the applications with any external testing. And usually you're applying, and you might get, when you apply, you might get interviewed, you might not. Some universities have like way too many applicants to interview anyone. And at the same time as you're applying, you're doing all the scholarship application. For many scholarships, you apply to the university and you apply to the scholarship. Those are two separate processes. So if I want to apply for, I'm making this up, the Emile Boutmy scholarship at Sciences Po, which is a scholarship at Sciences Po in Paris, I apply to the university and I apply to the scholarship. Those are two separate processes. And so that's additional documentation, maybe additional essays, maybe additional financial documents. If you're applying for a scholarship, oftentimes they'll ask for financial documents. So pay slips from your parents or bank statements or something like that. And then it's just waiting. And oftentimes you'll get a response within 2 to 3 months of submitting your application. And if everything works out great, you get in, but there's also the possibility of getting into a university but not getting the scholarship. That's a real possibility of like, because they're separate processes. So you might very well qualify for LSC, but didn't get the external scholarship or didn't get the ring fence scholarship. So now you're in a position where you have an offer somewhere, but it might not be affordable. And then you might not get in. That's fine. That's life. That's reality. A lot of people apply places and get rejected. That's why when students are applying, it's a burdensome process because it requires a lot of time and effort and energy to gather documents, to write essays. But at ALA, we recommend students to apply to like at least 8 universities, if not more, because you're not guaranteed to get in anywhere, especially when you need scholarship funding. So you need to diversify your list, not just apply in one country, apply in multiple countries, and then see what your options are, because you could be the most competitive student in the world and apply to 8 universities and only have one offer. That's how college admissions works. It's selective. It's a little bit arbitrary in the way they like select students. It's very opaque. You have no idea why you don't get in. But you need to have this big list of schools, because even if you have one dream school, that dream school might have a very, 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 very small acceptance rate and just not have space. So it's a process from start to end, from the actual start of applications to when decisions come out. It's usually about 6 or 7 months. It depends on where you're applying. But in the US, for example, is you apply and you start your applications. Students are working on their applications for the US now. You start it in October and then go through the process, and you finally hear back in about late March. And then you have to decide where you're going to go in May. So it's a long process. And that's not taking into consideration the research process and putting together a list of schools and iterating that and figuring out, like, this is where I want to apply, this is where I don't want to apply. If you add that in, that could be more than a year to 2 years to 3 years, depending on how serious people are about the process.
Wow. Thank you so much for your response. Well, we have spent more time than we actually requested for, so I would like us to rush the remaining parts. But then in summary, I just asked the question, and my question was, what's typically the steps required from interest to actually accessing scholarship? And she said the first thing basically is research. You need to start researching, and typically she recommends about 2 to 3 years before application process. So if you want to apply to a school in the US for next year, it's practically too late already or something. So because you need a research process in place and things like that. So 2 to 3 years, your research must start about 2 to 3 years before then. Then she talked about the fact that there will be tests required, and of course the university that you want to apply to would recommend the test. And guys, she said something which I found very interesting. She said applying to a university is different from applying for a scholarship. Applying to a university is different from applying for a scholarship. So there are possibilities that you might get admission to the university and not get the scholarship. So understand that there are 2 different things. So you need academic reports. You need some external testing, of course. For some schools, it's the GRE. Some schools, it's the GMAT. For some schools, the IELTS. Different exams like that, depending on the requirement from your school. Then you should also understand that to be on the safer side, she said that she recommends that you apply to about 8 universities at least, 8 different scholarship opportunities at least. And I think that principle also applies to grant funding, because I realized that there's a time when I was very active applying for grant funding. I realized that you just need to just keep applying. You don't apply to one until you put out your best application and you're expecting that you're going to get the opportunity. No, it's you putting your eggs in many baskets. Don't put your eggs in one basket. Apply for as many as possible. And she said duration typically from application to when you finally get a response is usually between 6 to 7 months. So guys, these are very, very interesting insights that she has given us as regards applying for scholarships. And to be honest, I do not take this opportunity for granted. Thank you so much once again for deciding to come upon this call. So one key question I want to ask is, what are the key things that are required to get selected? So I know that university put out requirements on their website. We want you to do this, you want to, but then there are usually those very salient things. And so, for example, I know that if I want to apply for a scholarship at the African Leadership Academy, I know that one of the very interesting things that ELA looks at is community impact.
Mhm.
That they look at that a lot, but then they will just list it on their website as one of those requirements. But then I personally know that it's one very strong thing that ALA looks at, for example. So in general, what do universities look at? They list these things, but then they are salient things that people do not usually pay attention to. So what are those key things?
Yeah, so it really depends on where you're applying, because there are some countries where you can apply to universities where really all they care about is marks. And then there are some places where you apply and they're more kind of well-rounded and holistic in what they're looking for in applicants. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It really depends on where you're applying and the type of institution you're applying. But generally, the rule of thumb is the first thing they look at is academics. So they look at proven academics. So how you did in high school, how you did on any kind of standardized test. And a standardized test could be a WIAC or of the world, or a kind of a national exam, because that's a benchmark test for them. And then they look at everything else. And everything else in the application tells a lot about character and a lot about kind of personality and kind of risks they've taken. And so generally universities are looking for a strong student who will bring something new to their university or will engage with all of the resources at their university, and make the best use of that education. But it's not a perfect science. And I think a lot of people get frustrated when they apply for opportunities that they think they're qualified for, but they don't get because they don't understand why they weren't accepted. But this is kind of the opaque part of university admission, is like, you will never know what makes you get in or not. And just one kind of stat so that everyone can see how university admissions works. This is, again, sorry, I'm using all US examples, but this was a US university. They released their statistics a couple of years ago. It's Tufts University outside of Boston. And they reviewed everyone's applications, and they saw that 75% of the applications were academically qualified for admission. Like, the grades were strong. Those students could walk into that university's classes and do fine. And then they did kind of a holistic review where they looked at your essays, where you talk about your passions and what you want to do and how you want to give back and how you want to make use of your education. And 40% were recommended for admission. And then they did another review where kind of this final review where they're debating applicants and they're trying to get it down. And at the end of the day, they could only accept 15% of their applicants. And so you go from 75% of students having the grades to walk into that university to only being able to accept 15. And so that's where everything else about you, kind of your personality, who you're from, where you're from, so like demographics matter. They need to admit a diverse group of students. They're not going to admit all students from one high school or all students from one town. And then they just look at what you've done. So proven leadership is a big thing in college admissions. When you're applying to university, you're often asked, what have you done in high school? Or if you're applying to grad school, what have you done in university? And universities use those metrics to kind of come up with a story about your leadership. So short answer is that there's no kind of fixed criteria. It depends on the institution. It depends on their priorities. But it's the first hurdle you have to jump over, regardless of where you're applying, is do you meet the qualifications? Do you meet the entry requirements? So if you're applying to Imperial College in London and Imperial wants 3 A stars and you have 3 Cs, you're not going to get past that threshold. Beyond that, with the students who qualify, it's very opaque. But Universities like to say that they're trying to find a well-rounded class of students who have different strengths and who have different interests. They're not going to admit all engineers. They're not going to admit all future doctors. So I think at the core of it is balance, proven leadership, character, and then what teachers and what professionals in your life say about you. So how does a teacher talk about you? What do they say about you? All of those play into decision making.
Thank you so much for your response. So guys, so what she said is that at the base level is you must ace their minimum requirement, which is of course certain grades and pass certain tests and get certain cutoff. She also made the point where she said that you cannot exactly know what would be the defining factor for you being selected. So, but based off what she said, I think the best recommendation would be to come strong in every form of requirement. So she talked about leadership, for example. So universities, grad schools are usually after how have you been able to exhibit leadership qualities or capacities. So you must be able to come strong in all of those ways. So for those who are currently in the university and are looking to chase grad school scholarships, for those who are currently in high school and are looking to chase university scholarships, please don't just focus on academics. Focus on those extracurricular things, community development, leadership. There are different clubs in schools. I know in universities there are science clubs, there are environmental clubs. Be part of these things. Apply for positions, lead teams, lead social projects. These are some key things that would help you in whatever statements that you're writing to apply for these scholarships. And of course, my last question is going to be the golden question, which is, where can we find these opportunities online and offline? So can you give us websites we can look out to, offline places, newspapers, people we should be speaking to? Where do we find these opportunities? I know a lot of people have been waiting to get a response to that. Where do we find these opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a hard one to answer because everything is so disaggregated. And the students who are applying to universities are oftentimes the ones who hear about opportunities through someone. And so it's challenging. Everything's kind of very spread out and there's no clean list of where you can find opportunities, but there are places that you can start. For local opportunities, like local companies have corporate social responsibility. For local scholarships, local companies have corporate social responsibility schemes. And some are probably more well-known in your community or in your country than others. But it's things like the example I gave at the beginning where a bank might have a few scholarships and you apply and it's competitive, but if you get it, they'll fund your scholarship they'll fund you to go to a local institution. And so that's, you can find that in your local community. You just have to engage with your local community and see what's out there. So there are kind of 3 levels of scholarships and different ways of approaching them. The first is kind of local CSR type opportunities. There are opportunities that exist on the government level. So those are things like the government, the government of Japan gives scholarships for students to attend. So like things like MEXT and JASO, which are government-funded scholarships that allow students from sub-Saharan Africa to apply for universities there. And those are primarily, you just have to look through, there's no clean list for this, but it's like, if you're looking at universities, oftentimes they'll list external funding sources on their website. So they'll list the fact that you can apply for some scholarships through them, but that they partner with external funding sources like government scholarship schemes to help students attend. And for institutional or international scholarships, like a lot exist on social media. There are websites like, Bolu, you might know this. There's like I don't even know, it's called After School Africa or something, that lists opportunities, but it's not 100% accurate. It could be out of date. So I think it's just about doing a lot of desktop research and seeing what exists and looking at different institutions and talking to people who went abroad and seeing how they did it. Good resources in country for people who want to go to the US are Education USA has offices that are nested within every US embassy. So you can go and you can get information on how to apply for admission and scholarships, and they give some help with testing. So that's a good resource you can tap into. Yeah, it should be much easier to find a clean list of scholarship opportunities, but it's not. And then there are like big kind of large scale opportunities that are focused on the African continent, but maybe located outside. So the scholarships like Ashinaga, which is a Japanese scholarship that supports students to go to university around the world, or programs like the MasterCard Foundation Scholarship Program, which partner with universities, right now, universities on the continent to provide students full scholarships. Those exist, and those are a little bit easier to find because they're under a brand name. But a lot of the scholarships, somebody should start a general kind of list of international opportunities or scholarships that people can apply to. But it's just about finding what you're looking for and then starting the research to see if what you're looking for can lead to funding.
Thank you so much for your response, Susan. So guys, if you are looking for local scholarships, please speak to people you know in local organizations. Some of these local companies around you offer scholarships. Ask people, oh, does the organization offer student scholarships? What do I need to do? And things like that. Oil companies, for example, in Nigeria, I know they offer a lot of scholarships as part of their CSR, which is their corporate social responsibility. And banks do also. I know telecommunication companies do. So if you're in Nigeria, for example, I know MTN does in Nigeria. I know Chevron does in Nigeria. I know Total Oil and Gas does in Nigeria, offers scholarships in Nigeria. And I know a couple of banks also offer scholarships in Nigeria. Mobile also offers scholarship for if you're in Nigeria. I'm sure it should be the same thing to across different countries that they are operational. I'm not too sure. So that's that for local scholarships. For local scholarships also, the government also offers scholarship, but typically the government, when they publish this scholarship, they publish them on newspapers and on the national television. So if you're in Nigeria, for example, look out for newspapers. You can ask your parents to bring newspapers for you from their office. And if you're in South Africa, I don't know how it works in South Africa, but I want to believe that the government will also announce via accredited means like the newspaper also, and of course through national television. Social media is one place. If you're on social media, you can please go to opportunities for Africans, and you will find opportunity front desk. She also talked about After School Africa. So After School Africa is a website where you can get, guys, I hope you are writing these things down. After School Africa, Education USA. This is our website that you can find these opportunities. And of course, Google. Just Google it. Just Google it. So this has been a very, very extensive but interesting conversation, and Susan has done justice to the topic of discourse. I want to appreciate it so much. We're supposed to take questions and answers. I don't know if people who are currently connected, those on Instagram, do you have questions? If you have questions, please type them out before we call it a day. And if you can't type it out, you can always reach out to us via DMs. Please send us Instagram DMs. We'll do as much as possible to compile these questions if they are. But I believe that this has been a very expounding question. I know someone asked the question earlier where he said, where do I get these opportunities? And of course, we just answered those questions. So for those who are on Instagram and they've asked questions, we have responded to some of those questions while the session was on. So thank you so much, Susan. Guys, I want you to please say thank you to Susan. Just type thank you, click the love button for those who are connected on Instagram, and let Susan know that we are really appreciative of our efforts. A couple of people are going to be watching this video back on on Instagram via our Instagram TV, and of course the video is also going to be available on Facebook Watch, and it's also going to be available on our YouTube page. So thank you so much, Suzanne, once again. We do not take this for granted. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming up on this program.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Cheers, Susan. Cheers. I'll
Bye.
definitely be in your WhatsApp. Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Bolu.
Yeah. Bye. All right, guys. That was a very interesting session from Susan. And for those who are not yet members of our community, please, I want you to go on Carry First, search for Carry First Community. It's an Instagram page. Search for Carry First Community and click the link on bio. For those who click the link on bio and register to join our community, they'll be getting direct information about several other programs and opportunities like this that we have. Yes, we've gone far more than what we anticipated for the day, but I know you would agree with me that it's been a very, very interesting and productive session. So for those who have questions, like I said, please send your questions via DM. We'll be responding to them appropriately. Till next time, when we'll be hosting another Gamers Gaming. When we'll be hosting another Talking Money and Opportunity. Cheers, guys. Bye.